released 4 grainy black and white images that changed everything. A figure in a ski mask, gloves on both hands, a backpack strapped to their shoulders, a gun holstered at the waist. The footage existed all along. Buried in corrupted data files, hidden in the back-end systems of the surveillance network, waiting to be recovered. Today, we are breaking down what the FBI found, what it means for the investigation, and the disturbing questions nobody is answering about the disappearance of Savannah Guthrie's mother. If you want the full picture of what actually happened that night in the Arizona desert, stay until the end. The evidence tells a story that the headlines are missing. Before we can understand what happened to Nancy Guthrie, you need to understand who she was. Nancy Ellen Long was born on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She graduated from the University of Kentucky, married mining engineer Charles Guthrie, and followed his work around the world before settling in Tucson, Arizona. Their daughter Savannah was born in Melbourne in 1971. Nancy raised 3 children in a brick house in the Catalina foothills, a quiet community north of Tucson where prickly pear cacti line the winding roads, and the nights are dark because there are no streetlights. In 1988, Charles Guthrie died suddenly during a mining trip in Mexico. He was 49. Nancy was 46. Savannah was 16. Nancy did not collapse. She went back to work. For nearly 2 decades, she served at the University of Arizona, making sure all 3 of her children could attend college. Cameron became a fighter pilot. Annie became a poet and teacher. Savannah became the co-anchor of the Today Show. Nancy watched it all happen from the desert home she had lived in for more than 50 years. She was 84 years old, mentally sharp, fiercely independent. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, she had dinner at her daughter Annie's house, played card games with her family, and was driven home around 9:48 in the evening. She would not be seen again. The timeline of what happened next is critical. Every minute matters. At 9:48 p.m., Nancy's son-in-law dropped her off at her home in the Catalina foothills. The garage door opened. 2 minutes later, it closed. Everything appeared normal. For the next 4 hours, there is silence in the record. Then, at 1:47 a.m., Nancy's doorbell camera disconnected. This is not a technical glitch. The device did not lose power. It was physically removed from the wall. Someone took it. About 30 minutes later, around 2:15 a.m., the surveillance system detected movement at the property, but the camera that would have captured that movement was already gone. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with her Apple devices. That timestamp is critical. Nancy relied on that pacemaker. She lived with chronic health issues and took daily medication that, according to her children, she needed to survive. The pacemaker was her lifeline, connected to monitoring systems that tracked her heart in real time. At 2:28 in the morning, the signal went dark. The next day, February 1st, Nancy was supposed to watch a virtual church service with a friend. She did not appear. Calls went unanswered. Her family began to worry. Around noon, a family member drove to her home to check on her. They found her vehicle still in the garage, her wallet still inside, her medication sitting on the counter, and blood on the front porch. The 911 call went out just after noon. By evening, the Pima County Sheriff's Department had declared Nancy Guthrie's home a crime scene. By the next morning, the FBI had joined the investigation. Nancy Guthrie was gone. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos was direct from the beginning. Nancy Guthrie did not wander off. She did not have dementia. She was not confused about where she was or who she was. But she could not have walked away on her own. Nanos told reporters that Nancy could barely walk 50 yards by herself due to her limited mobility. The idea that she simply left in the middle of the night, without her medication, without her phone, without telling anyone, made no sense. The evidence pointed to one conclusion. She was taken against her will, possibly in the middle of the night, possibly by someone who came prepared. The blood on the porch was tested. DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Nancy. Forensic investigators began documenting footprint patterns, trace evidence, and any material that might have been left behind by whoever had been in that house. But the most important piece of evidence was missing: the doorbell camera. Nancy had a Google Nest surveillance system installed at her home, with multiple cameras covering the property. The footage those cameras captured should have shown exactly what happened, who approached the house, how they got inside, and what direction they went when they left. Instead, there was nothing. The doorbell camera had been removed, and whatever was stored in the cloud had been recorded over. Corrupted, inaccessible, or so investigators thought. For 8 days, the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department worked with private sector partners to recover any footage that might still exist. They went into the back-end systems, the residual data, the digital fragments that survive even when files appear to be deleted. And they found it. On February 10th, FBI Director Kash Patel released what they had recovered. 4 black and white still images captured by Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera on the morning of her disappearance. The images show a figure standing on Nancy's porch. The person is wearing a ski mask with holes cut for the eyes and mouth. Black gloves cover both hands. A backpack is strapped across the shoulders. And at the waist, positioned over the crotch area, is what appears to be a holstered firearm. This was not a random burglar checking windows. This was someone who came equipped, masked, and armed, carrying a pack large enough to hold supplies or tools, standing at the front door of an 84-year-old woman's home in the middle of the night. The footage also captured video. In one clip, the figure attempts to block the doorbell camera lens with a gloved hand. When that does not work, they reach down and pull a plant from the yard, using the foliage to cover the camera's view. Then the camera went dark. Whoever this person was, they knew the camera was there. They knew how to disable it. And they knew Nancy was inside. Within hours of the footage release, the FBI began building a profile. Based on analysis of the recovered video, investigators described the suspect as a male, 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build. A black mustache was visible through the holes in the ski mask. The backpack was identified as a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker pack. It is sold exclusively at Walmart stores across the country. Investigators began working with Walmart management to identify and isolate any customers who purchased that specific backpack in the weeks leading up to Nancy's disappearance. The holster was unusual. The positioning, the design, the way it sat on the suspect's body, all drew attention. Law enforcement began canvassing gun shops throughout Arizona, showing the doorbell footage, asking if anyone recognized the holster style or the person wearing it. There was another detail. Investigators believed they could see a ring on one of the suspect's fingers, visible even through the glove material. Sheriff Nanos confirmed that his team was analyzing the images to determine whether the ring could provide additional identification. Every frame of footage was being examined, every shadow, every pixel. and then a new piece of evidence emerged from the desert floor. Approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, investigators found gloves discarded on the side of the road. Not just any gloves. These appeared to match the gloves worn by the masked figure in the doorbell footage. Same style, same color, same fit. The FBI recovered multiple pairs of gloves during their search of the area surrounding Nancy's property. Approximately 16 pairs in total. Most of them belonged to volunteer searchers who had discarded them while combing the desert terrain. But one pair was different. Preliminary testing at a private forensic lab in Florida revealed male DNA on the gloves. An unknown male. Someone who was not Nancy Guthrie. Someone who was not any of her family members. The sample was submitted to the FBI Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. CODIS is the national database that contains more than 19 million offender profiles collected from criminals across the country. The result came back, no match. Whoever left their DNA on those gloves had never been entered into the federal system. They had never been arrested for a qualifying offense. They had never been required to submit a sample. But the investigation was not over. Sheriff Nanos announced that forensic teams would now pursue genealogical DNA analysis. Using the genetic material recovered from the gloves, investigators could potentially identify relatives of the suspect, building a family tree that might eventually lead them to the person who stood on Nancy Guthrie's porch that night. It is a process that has solved cold cases decades old. But it takes time. And Nancy Guthrie may not have time. While forensic teams processed evidence in laboratories, another dimension of the case was unfolding in the media. On February 2nd, a Tucson television station received an email containing a ransom note. The contents were not made public, but reports indicated the note contained specific details about Nancy Guthrie's home and what she was wearing the night she disappeared. Details only someone with inside knowledge would possess. Over the following days, additional ransom communications appeared. TMZ reported receiving notes demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin, including a specific cryptocurrency wallet address and deadlines. One note claimed Nancy was still alive but scared, aware of the demands being made. But were these notes real? The FBI acknowledged they were analyzing every piece of correspondence, but they could not confirm whether any notes came from the person actually holding Nancy Guthrie. High-profile kidnapping cases attract opportunists, people who see an opportunity to extract money from desperate families. On February 5th, a California man named Derek Colella was arrested on federal charges. Prosecutors alleged the 42-year-old from Hawthorne had posed as Nancy's abductor and sent fake ransom demands. He had no involvement in her disappearance. He simply saw news coverage and decided to profit from tragedy. If Colella's notes were fake, the question remained, were any of the ransom demands legitimate? Savannah Guthrie was supposed to fly to Italy. The 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan were approaching, and she was scheduled to co-host NBC's coverage of the opening ceremonies. Instead, she received the worst phone call of her life. Within hours of learning her mother was missing, Savannah was on a plane to Tucson. She stepped away from her NBC duties indefinitely. On February 4th, Savannah appeared in a video posted to Instagram alongside her siblings Cameron and Annie. She addressed the ransom note directly. "We are ready to talk." However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know without a doubt that she is alive and that you have her. 3 days later, another video appeared. This time, Savannah delivered a single message. "We beg you now to return our mother to us so we can celebrate with her. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." A ransom deadline came and went. The family heard nothing. No proof of life was provided. The silence was deafening. As the investigation entered its second week, law enforcement began expanding the search parameters. The Pima County Sheriff's Department asked residents within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's home to review their surveillance footage. They specified particular dates: January 11th, between 9 p.m. and midnight; January 31st, between 9:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. These were not random requests. Former Secret Service agent Jonathan Wackrow told CNN that the specific dates indicated investigators had reason to believe something relevant happened. They were looking for evidence of surveillance, someone watching the house, someone preparing. The theory was troubling. This did not appear to be a crime of opportunity. Someone had selected Nancy Guthrie. Someone had learned her routines. Someone had planned this. Speculation online turned ugly. Amateur sleuths began pointing fingers at family members. Sheriff Nanos shut it down. On February 17th, he declared that all members of the Guthrie family had been cleared as suspects. He said they had talked to them, they had taken their phones, they had taken their computers, and they had processed their vehicles. They are victims, plain and simple. The family had been cooperating fully since the moment Nancy disappeared. Nearly 3 weeks have passed since Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her home in the Arizona desert. The FBI has fielded between 40,000 and 50,000 leads. The reward for information has been increased to $100,000. Multi-agency search teams continue to comb the desert landscape surrounding her property. Google is attempting to recover additional footage from Nancy's surveillance system. The manufacturer of Nancy's pacemaker is working with authorities to determine whether the device can be located, but so far, nothing has worked. Nancy Guthrie remains missing. Her medication sits on her kitchen counter. Her family waits for a phone call that has not come. Her community gathers outside her home, leaving yellow roses as symbols of hope. The masked figure on her porch has not been identified.